Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my episode 3 of my bookshelf tour, which is my literary fiction section, and I actually filmed it as one video, but it is so long because I go in depth with each book, or almost each and every book, giving you a synopsis and my thoughts, and it just took so long that I'm going to make a part 1 and a part 2. So this is part 1 and I will finish the rest of my literary fiction section in part 2. Just because I don't want this to be super long and then you guys have more episodes in the bookshelf tour series. So it's going to be bookshelf tour episode 3 for literary fiction part 1 and then episode 3 literary fiction part 2. And then we are going to get into classics and everything. What's different about my classics section is that my classics section is broken up into different sections, but my literary fiction section is just literary fiction, and it's quite a big section of my bookshelves, which I just don't have broken up in any way, so that's why it's so long. But this is probably going to be the only part 1 and part 2 in my bookshelf tour series. So anyway, I go through every single one of my literary fiction shelves, and yes, so let's go back to past Carolyn, before she knew how long this would be and how much I would talk. I hope you like that I'm going more in depth with each book. If a book doesn't interest you, feel free to skip through. So anyway, I hope that you find some books that maybe pique your interest and that you enjoy, and I will see you in part 2. Okay, so here we are. We left off all the way up here, and because this is such a strange angle and my tripod doesn't go too high, I'm just going to take down the books and hold them up for you. So the first books we have are all Sally Rooney. So this is how I have them stacked on my shelves. We have Conversations with Friends, Normal People, and then my US edition of Normal People. So these are the UK publications from Faber and Faber. This one is the US edition from Hogarth Press, and then this one is the UK edition of Beautiful World, Where Are You by Faber and Faber as well. So first we have Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. This was the second Sally Rooney book I read. I first read Normal People, fell in love with it, fell in love with her writing, and then had to read her first book. In comparison to Normal People, I do prefer Normal People. Her books are very personal preference. I know a lot of people don't like her writing, don't like her books, but I am on the other side of that. I love her books, I love her writing, and I'm a very big fan. So first we have Conversations with Friends, which I like a lot, but not as much as Normal People. So then we have Normal People. These are the, like I said, the Faber and Faber paperbacks. I love these designs, so I'm so happy to have them on my shelves. And I love this cover design. I think it's just such a perfect representation of the characters' relationship with one another. So this is one of my favorite books. And then I have it, this is the edition that I first read the book in, the US publication. I kind of prefer the design of this one with the sardine can, but I do love the colors of this one because blue and green are my favorite colors. Anyway, random little fun facts. And then the last book I have is Beautiful World, Where Are You? This is her newest book. I read it last year and I really enjoyed it. I was expecting to like it a bit more than I did. I just felt kind of indifferent to the characters and their relationships with one another. But anyway, I adore this cover design. It's so beautiful. And this is the Waterstones Special Edition, which includes an exclusive short story, which I haven't read yet because I wanted to give myself time after finishing Beautiful World, Where Are You? But hopefully soon I'll pick up that short story. It'll take me no time at all. But yes, I'm so excited for more Sally Rooney books. She's one of my favorite contemporary literary fiction writers, and I will read literally anything that this woman writes. Oh, I didn't take it down. I also have her short story, Mr. Salary, which is another one of my favorites. I read it at the end of 2020, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I wish that it was longer, that's the only thing, because I loved it so much that I wanted to know more. But this is also from Faber and Faber. Those are all of my Sally Rooney books. Then the last two books I have on my top shelf, They are both by Andre Aciman, and that is Call Me By Your Name and Find Me. So Call Me By Your Name is the first book, and then Find Me is the sequel that was more of a recent publication. Call Me By Your Name was first written in 2007, and then Find Me came out in 2019, I believe, because I actually went to the book signing and the release party on the release day, which was just the coolest thing. Yeah, 2019. I love these two books. Call Me By Your Name is one of my favorite books ever, and then Find Me, the sequel, is another one of my favorite books ever. I always tell people, don't go into reading Find Me right after Call Me By Your Name. I would give yourself a lot of time in between and read it more like a companion novel and not a sequel, because there's a really big gap in space and time between the two books. So I think reading Call Me By Your Name, giving yourself time to forget it a little bit, and then reading the sequel will kind of act like you have grown with the characters, because of the space in between the books is like the space you're giving yourself between reading them. They're both exquisitely written. I love Andre Aciman's writing, and like I said, I did go to the book signing. I went to it was through Books Are Magic, which is an independent bookshop in Brooklyn, and my roommate and I, when I was living in New York City, we went and we saw Andre Aciman. I actually gave him a book cover redesign that I did for Call Me By Your Name. I developed a lot as an illustrator, and I wanted to redo my book cover redesign. I do that a lot, where I do a book cover redesign and then I redesign my redesign. Anyway, so I gave that to him, and he took it, and I gave him a printout. I made a print of it, and that was I just almost started crying when I met him. Anyway, that was such an incredible experience. So these two books are super special to me because they're both signed by Andre Aciman, which is just like the coolest thing ever to me. And I have such fond memories of going and getting this book. So this is the actual edition that I got when I went into the book signing. There it is. For Carolyn, Andre Aciman. That's so cool. I'm so in love with his writing, so to be able to meet one of my favorite authors is so exciting. Anyway, those are the last two books on my top shelf, and then we will move all the way over there and start back up with more literary fiction books. Okay, now we are on to the next part of my shelves. I also almost forgot to mention that the first few books in my adult contemporary and adult literary fiction section are all of my favorites, so that's why I start with Sally Rooney and Andre Aciman, and now we are moving on to especially my Fredrik Backman section, because Fredrik Backman is my favorite contemporary writer ever. But I do have my Outlander books, so here I have a little piece of dried hydrangea, which I just keep on my shelves. That was from a plant that we had years ago, and I still have it. But anyway, the first book that I have is The Outlandish Companion, and this is a book that I got for my birthday some years ago. I think it was 2019. When I was going through my Outlander kick. I fell in love with Outlander and the setting of Scotland, and now I desperately want to visit Scotland. That's like one of the #1 places on my list to travel to, and this is a really amazing companion. And I haven't read it yet, but I still want to continue reading the books because I haven't read the 4th book yet, which is Drums of Autumn, and I think it's almost going to be time to do so. Outlander is it's kind of like a guilty pleasure read, really beautiful smut, I guess. And I'm not really a smut reader, but yes, the setting, I think the concept of this is basically a time travel novel about like two star-crossed lovers, and one is from a different time than the other one, and it's all set in Scotland in the Highlands, and it really introduced me to the Highlands and to Scotland, and it made me fall in love with Scotland as a place, and I really want to travel there and visit, and especially go to Edinburgh, and so many amazing, beautiful places, and this made me fall in love with Scotland, so I will always love Outlander for doing that for me. So yes, I read the first book, fell in love with it, and then I started watching the TV show, and then I read the second book, which is Dragonfly in Amber, and really loved that one as well. And then I read the third book, Voyager, which I haven't continued on after this one. I haven't read the fourth book yet, Gems of Autumn, or watched the season. I haven't stayed up to date because I want to keep reading the books first, but I haven't, so I definitely want to do that soon. Then we have the pride and joy of my literary fiction section, and that is my Fredrik Backman collection. If you don't know, I am the biggest Fredrik Backman fan. I have read every single book he has ever written that's been translated into English, except for one book, because I don't want to not have an unread Fredrik Backman book on my shelves to look forward to reading. I really don't want to read all of his books because that just makes me really sad. So the one book I have not read from him yet is Britt Marie Was Here, and this book just sits on my shelf giving me comfort, and I always know that I have Britt Marie waiting for me. But anyway, the other books that I will go through first. This is his newest book. This was the second book that I read this year. This is Anxious People. This edition is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, which comes with a short story, an additional short story at the end, which I haven't read yet, kind of like Sally Rooney's Beautiful World, Where Are You?, because I wanted to give myself a little bit of time in between before reading. I talk a bit about this book in my reading vlogs, so I will link that down below or up here. I loved this book. It's a new all-time favorite. Literally everything that Fredrik Backman writes, I love. This is about a bank robbery, which turns into a hostage drama, which turns into so much more, and it's not that though. Like, it's so much more than what it is set up to be. This book is basically about caring for people that you haven't known for very long, or caring for people that you barely know, and the things that you do for the people that you care for with your whole heart. And it's full of hope and beauty and kindness and found family and friendship and love and loss and just love. It's incredible. Then we have my very favorite literary fiction book ever, and it is a book in a series, and that is Bear Town by Fredrik Backman. This story means the entire world to me. I love it so much. This is a book about a hockey town in Sweden, in the Swedish wilderness, and it's all surrounding the town's hockey team, and the town's hockey team is really important to them. The boys on the hockey team are like town celebrities, and everyone is really rooting for them. It's like the one thing that everyone can look forward to is the hockey games, and they want them to go far. And this is about how the main player on the hockey team does something that affects the way that people view him and the entire hockey team and the whole town. And there is a trigger warning for sexual assault in this book, so I just want to put that out there. But it is one of the most impactful books I've ever read. This remains to be my favorite book, my favorite contemporary book ever, and it also has a sequel, which is Us Against You. It's another continuation of what is happening in this town and the results of this act. And I want to read you the first line, or the first page of the book, because it will sell you. It's like one of the best first pages I've ever read. So this is literally the first page. It is just that line, and it says, "Late one evening, toward the end of March, a teenager picked up a double-barreled shotgun, walked into the forest, put the gun to someone else's forehead, and pulled the trigger. This is the story of how we got there." Please read it if you haven't. Please, please, please. So, to show you how much I adore it, I have it in hardback, and then I have it in paperback, and then I even have it facing out in the original Swedish edition, because I am just so obsessed. So yes, this is the original Swedish edition. Can I read it? No. Do I care? No. Do I wish I could read Swedish just so I could read Fredrik Backman? Absolutely, 100%. And then this is Us Against You. I wish I could read Swedish just to read Fredrik Backman, but these are like my little treasures on my shelf. Even though I can't read them, I love them with my whole heart. I wish I could read Fredrik Backman in his original, though. That's exactly how I feel about all translated fiction. Then the next books that I have is My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry, kind of fairy tale-esque story with sort of magical realism, and I really, really enjoyed it. Not one of my very favorites, but I love it. Not comparing it to his other books, I adore it, but comparing it to his other books, I don't love it as much as Anxious People and Beartown, the ones that I've talked about so far. And then we have Britt Marie Was Here, which is kind of a companion to My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry, because Britt Marie is a character in My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry. So I haven't read this yet, but I don't want to read it yet. Yet. I will read it eventually. Then, another one of my very favorite books on the face of the earth. I always recommend either starting with this book or with Beartown. I usually recommend starting with this book if you are new to Fredrik Backman, and that is A Man Called Uwe. This is one of the most heartfelt, beautiful, just heartwarming, hopeful, funny. My favorite thing about Fredrik Backman's writing is how funny it is and how amazing his humor is. And this is of course about a man called Uwe, and this is about his dealing with the loss of his wife. His wife recently passed away, and this is about him not wanting to live his life without her. And so he keeps trying to end his life, and he keeps getting interrupted. I have an affinity for like adorable, grumpy, elderly men. I know that sounds so weird, but I used to work at a nursing home, and I just love the elderly. I know that sounds really weird, but every time I see an old person, my heart just like swells 10 sizes, and I want to help them. I want to hear their stories. I love how Uwe, this book is just about him complaining about like modern society and phones, like technology and teenagers, and it's just, this book just is everything that I love, and I highly recommend you pick it up if you are new to Fredrik Backman and you don't know where to start. I highly recommend starting with A Man Called Uwe. It's just such a gorgeous story, and I love it so much. I could just keep going on and on. And then the next book that I have from Fredrik Backman is Things My Son Needs to Know About the World, and this is a nonfiction book, and it is found in the parenting section of bookstores. So what I always say about this book is that you don't have to be a parent to read it. This book is all about Fredrik Backman's experience with his newborn son. But if you have been a child of a parent, which we all have been, then you can read this book and you can get something out of it, because it is just one of the most funny, heartfelt, heartwarming books ever. And I know that I keep describing his books in that way, but that's because that's exactly how they are. Let's see if I can find one of my favorite entries, because they're pretty much like just little vignettes and little snippets of things that he wants his son to know. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones. It says, yes, childhood trauma, this and childhood trauma that. I drew one small butcher's chart on the picture on the front of the packet of animal crackers. And suddenly I'm being referred to by my first, middle, and last names. I think that's a bit much. Oh God. I just think he's hilarious. I just want to be his friend. I just want to hang out with him like for a day and just hear all his little funny comments. This is another great one. This seemed like a slightly less idiotic and irresponsible idea at the time. But yes, note to self, whiteout is really, really, really hard to get off a 2-year-old. I found it. Okay. So the title says, this parenthood thing didn't come with instructions. That's all I'm saying. You spit on the napkin. Then you wipe the child's face with the napkin. You don't spit straight onto the child. My bad. That's my very favorite one. I love this. I love Fredrik Backman. Clearly, I keep saying that. The last two are novellas. The first one is The Deal of a Lifetime. Because it's a novella, I don't want to say too much. I'll just read the quote on the back. It says, "Everyone is always negotiating, all of the time. You're doing the deal of your life every day, and this was mine." Such an incredible book. Highly recommend reading it. I don't want to say too much about these because they're so short. And then this one is one of the most impactful books I've ever read, and it is "And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer." And this is about, I can tell you a little bit more about this one. It's about this father and son and grandson, and how the grandfather is losing his memory with every passing day. And it's really about memory loss and family and growing up and growing old. And because I was working at that nursing home, I worked on the dementia unit, which was basically all of the residents didn't remember me. Every time I would go to work, they didn't remember who I was, and I worked there for 4 years, and every day they didn't remember me. And that was okay. I mean, it was upsetting to think about, but it was just normal. It's just how it was. And then my grandfather, when he was much older, he had dementia before he passed. And so dementia and memory loss are things that are really close to my heart and that affect me a lot. And this book, so beautifully written, so beautifully executed, and it just means so much to me to read a story that is so close to my own experiences. "Isn't that the best of all life's ages?" an old man thinks as he looks at his grandchild. "When a boy is just big enough to know how the world works, but still young enough to refuse to accept it." I just want to reread it right now. So good. So this is my last Fredrik Backman book on my shelves. I hope you have enjoyed my little Fredrik Backman tangent. Please read his books. Please start with A Man Called Uwe, then read maybe Beartown, then Anxious People, then also his novellas and his nonfiction, and my grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry, and Bert Murray was here, and all of his books. Also, I do want to mention The Winners, which is the third book and the final book in the Beartown trilogy, is coming out in September, I believe, in English. I don't know how I'm going to cope with the ending of my favorite contemporary series. I don't know how I will survive. Anyway, let's keep moving on and pick up the pace because I feel like I could be here forever. So now we have the next section of my bookshelf, and this is obviously more contemporaries, and we start with one of my other favorite contemporary novelists, which is Kristin Hannah. The first book that I read from her is The Nightingale, and this is one of the most incredible World War II stories I've ever read. I am a huge fan of learning about the World Wars, especially World War II. This is set in France, and it's kind of a dual timeline, and it's about these two sisters' experience. They're very different approaches and reactions to dealing with the World War. It's one of my very, very favorites I've ever read. This is one of those books that I felt everything that was described immediately when you read it affects your senses, and it's just an incredible, incredible story. So this is the book that made me fall in love with Kristin Hannah, and then I read her other book, which is this one, and this is The Great Alone. This is set in Alaska. When the story starts, our main character, she is telling us the story of also her father was a prisoner of war, I believe in Vietnam, and it's about the post-traumatic stress that he deals with and how it affects her and her mom. What I love about this book is that Alaska is its own character. I love when books treat the setting as their own character. So one of my very favorite books, highly recommend reading this one as well. Then I read Firefly Lane by Kristin Hannah. This book made me sob my eyes out. This is another sort of dual timeline book set in the 70s and also more in, I think, the 2000s. This was just recently turned into a TV show. I haven't watched the TV show because I've heard mixed things about it, and I kind of just want to have the book be on its own in my mind and in my heart. Ranking them, The Nightingale is my favorite, and then The Great Alone, and then Firefly Lane. Then the last Kristin Hannah book on my shelves I have is True Colors, and this is a book that I haven't read yet actually, so I can't say too much about it. Then we have Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. I got this for the Rory Gilmore readathon reading lists because this is a book that Rory read in Gilmore Girls. If you don't know, my friend Kira and I do 24-hour Rory Gilmore readathons where we try and read as many books on the Rory Gilmore reading list as possible in 24 hours, and this is one of them. The back says, "Welcome to the wonderful world of America's foremost humorist, David Sedaris, where learning French, like life, is littered with idiosyncratic delight." And I believe this is just about David Sedaris trying to learn French, which is why it says "Me Talk Pretty One Day." And I love this cover. I think it's so fantastic. And I've heard amazing things about this book. Very excited to read it. And then the next book is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. This is another one that I got specifically for the Rory Gilmore readathon, but I have heard incredible things about this book. I know so many people love it, and I love this cover as well. It's so beautiful, and every time I hear about this book, it's someone saying that it made them cry and that it's so heartbreaking and they sobbed while reading it, and that is all I need to know to pick up a book. If it makes you cry, I am interested. I just love heartbreaking books and books that make you emotional. I don't know too much about this book, and I kind of want to keep it that way, especially because I know it's emotional. I want to go in just with an open mind and ready to cry. That's all I need to know. Then the next book is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I got this book right when it came out. I got this beautiful Waterstones edition. It's just absolutely gorgeous. I believe it's signed as well. Oh, look at those end papers. Oh my gosh. Yep, it's signed. I even got a signed edition. Have I read it yet? No. Why? I don't know. I'm hoping to read this one very, 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 very soon because I bought it, like I said, right when it was published, and I still have yet to read it. And it's a book all about Shakespeare's wife and children, and it's less about Shakespeare himself and more about Hamnet, his son, and the inspiration to Hamlet, and also his wife. And I like that we have a book, a historical fiction book, centering around Shakespeare, but he's not the main character. I'm really interested in that, and everybody that reads this book says that it's exquisite, and I just can't wait to agree, because I know I'm gonna love it. Then the next book I have is The Librarian of Auschwitz by Antonio Itube, and this is translated by Lilith Thwaites. It says, based on the true story of Auschwitz prisoner Dita Kraus. And this is an incredibly beautiful book. I also love the cover about this young girl who becomes a type of librarian in the camps at Auschwitz, and about how she is really the protector of the books. And it is an incredibly beautiful story. Again, I love World War II fiction, whether it's based on a true story or fiction or non-fiction. It's something that I'm so fascinated by. It breaks my heart reading it, of course, but I have such an interest in this time period and the emotional effects that it had on the people that dealt with these incredibly heartbreaking circumstances. So highly recommend reading this book. It is an incredible read. Then the next book is Vincent and Theo by Deborah Heligman, and this is a book all about Vincent and Theo. Vincent and Theo van Gogh. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to introduce yourself to the life of Vincent and Theo, and this also has little snippets from Vincent's letters as well, but it also explains not only Vincent's life but Theo's life. So when you go and read Vincent's letters from and to Theo, then I feel like I'll be able to understand the circumstances a bit better in the timeline. So this is just a wonderful book. It does have some of his paintings throughout it. It is just a beautiful, beautiful book about his life, and it goes through a bunch of different phases of his life and how his emotional state developed as he got older. We also have some beautiful prints and photographs. Oh, that's one of my favorites. Yeah, so just a gorgeous, gorgeous book. If you're interested in learning more about Van Gogh's life, I highly, highly recommend picking it up because it is just a wonderful read. So beautiful. Then, as you can see, the next book is also a Vincent van Gogh read, and this is Vincent's books, Van Gogh and the Writers Who Inspired Him by Marielle Guzzoni. I specifically got this book because I really want to do a video where I read a bunch of Van Gogh's favorite books and try and figure out maybe how they inspired some of his work or how they influenced him, because I'm fascinated how books and art go together, and I think that that would just be a great way to learn about Vincent van Gogh through his favorite books. So this is a book all about Van Gogh's books, so I thought before I actually go about reading his favorite books, I should learn a bit more of backstory about him and his life as a reader, because he was a very passionate reader, and this is a wonderful way to do so. This also has some of his paintings in it as well, and sketches, and any book with Van Gogh in it is a winner. Oh, this is one of my favorites as well. So beautiful. I love his paintings of books. They are just stunning. Yeah, look at that. Oh, gorgeous. Ooh, one of my favorites as well. Love that one too. See, we have first edition Charles Dickens over here. Those are his Christmas books. This is just so exciting to me because it is my favorite combination of words and pictures and art history and books, which is just the best. Very excited for that one. Then we have another book that I am so excited for it, and that is The Artful Dickens by John Mullen. This is the tricks and ploys of the greatest novelist, and if you are familiar with the Dickens versus Tolstoy debate and book club, the original Dickens and Tolstoy debate, the scholar that was debating on Team Dickens was John Mullen, all about the incredible tricks and ploys of Charles Dickens's own writing, and the fact that this book exists makes me incredibly happy, and I just cannot wait to read it. The next book we have is Night by Elie Wiesel. This is nonfiction about Elie Wiesel's own experience in the concentration camps. I read this book for the first time when I was in school, actually, and it was one of the first books that made me really interested in learning about World War II. Of course, reading fiction books about a certain time period is always beneficial, but when you have a nonfiction that's the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, it's just, you can't go wrong, really. It's just such an incredible way to learn about that time. Then I have Jonathan Livingston Seagull, the complete edition, which includes the Rediscovered Part 4. This is by Richard Bach, and this has photographs by Russell Munson. And this is a wonderful book about this seagull and how he kind of goes against the norm, and it's a really beautiful story. I don't want to give too much away. This was also a gift from my aunt, so it's very special to me for that. It says it beautifully on the back. Jonathan Livingston Seagull is a story for readers who know that somewhere there's a higher way of living than scuffing the tracks of others. A story for someone who yearns to fly. It's just an incredibly beautiful and inspiring book. Then the next book is Swimming in the Dark by Tomasz Jodorowsky. This is a book that I read last year and completely fell in love with it. It's like a coming-of-age sexual awakening in Poland during a very tumultuous time in its history. And it's not only this coming-of-age story, and it's not only a beautiful sexual awakening male-male romance, but it's set in this incredible backdrop of how a lot of political conflict can affect people's lives, and it's just an incredibly beautiful story. It's so much more than what I guess you would expect from it, and it's just a beautifully written book. This is so poetic and stunning. Another book that plays a really big role in the characters' lives in this book is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, and that is this book is the reason why I read Giovanni's Room last year as well, because I wanted to understand the significance it had on the characters, and I'm so glad that it introduced me to Giovanni's Room because I loved it. It's such an incredible story. The next book I have is Mr. Dickens and His Carol. This was wonderfully gifted to me from Emma from her YouTube channel Emmy, and this is a book about Charles Dickens writing A Christmas Carol, and I believe some of his other books as well. Emma did say that this does spoil a few of his later novels, so I'm not going to pick this up very soon. I want to read more of his books first, but then I feel like once I've read more of his books I'll pick this one up, and I'm very excited too. The next book I have is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante. This is book 1 of the Napolitan novels, and fun fact about me is I am 100% Italian. My family is all from Italy and I am from Italian descent, and I have yet to read a lot of Italian literature, and I have yet to read Elena Ferrante. I am part Napolitan, so to be able to read a book set in Naples, where my family is from, is just so wonderful, and I really can't wait to read this book because I have heard wonderful things about it, and it's set in Italy, which is one of my favorite places for books to be set. That's one of my goals this year, is to read a lot more Italian literature. So very excited for this one. Hopefully we'll read it soon. The next book I have is Athenry, An Odyssey of Sacrifice, Survival, and Love by Cahal Dunn. I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly because it's Irish, but my uncle through marriage is Irish, so I'm not Irish, but he is, and he read this book all about Athenry, and I don't honestly know too much about it. He explained it to me, but I don't remember too much, so I will read the back. Between 1788 and 1886, approximately 164,000 convicts, 80% men and 20% women, were transported to the penal colonies in Australia from England and Ireland. Fewer than 5% of them made it home. And I think this is the story of that experience and that voyage, and my uncle read it and loved it, and he knows that I'm very passionate about Scotland and Ireland and England and learning more about their history, so he very kindly gifted me this wonderful book, and I'm very excited to read it because I know that he absolutely loved it. The second to last book on this section of my shelf is The Sky Painted Gold by Laura Wood. This is a book that was gifted to me from my best friend Emma. She has a beautiful Instagram. It's at Emma Redwood, so I highly recommend following her. She posts the most beautiful things. She and I went to the same college together for illustration, and she posts about books and art, and she is just one of the best people that I know. And she gifted me this gorgeous book because she also loves reading. And how beautiful is this cover design? That's just stunning. Like, look at that. Wow. So again, I don't know too much about this one, so I will read the back. The back says, when Lou steals inside the grand Cardew house in the dreamy summer of 1929, she is drawn into the lives of the Cardew siblings, glittering whirlwind Caitlin and handsome enigmatic Robert. But as Lou is swept into their dazzling world of moonlit parties, unrivaled glamour, and whispered secrets, can she stay true to herself and her heart? And this, I know a lot of people compare it to the feelings of The Great Gatsby. I'm very excited to read this book, and I think Emma and I are planning on reading it together. So very excited about that. I also haven't read Laura Wood before, but I know so many people love her books, so I'm very excited too. Then the last book on my shelf is another one of my favorites, and that is Tin Man by Sarah Winman. I am in love with this cover design. It is Van Gogh's Sunflowers, and Van Gogh's Sunflowers, the painting itself, kind of opens up this book and has a relatively big effect on the characters' lives. And when you take off the dust jacket, we have a beautiful sunflower, which I just love. So at the top it says, "This is almost a love story, but it's not as simple as that. Ellis and Michael are 12-year-old boys when they first become friends, and for a long time it is just the two of them, cycling the streets of Oxford, teaching themselves how to swim, discovering poetry, and dodging the fists of overbearing fathers. And then one day, this closest of friendships grows into something more. Many years later, Ellis is married to Annie, and Michael is nowhere in sight, which leads to the question, what happened in the years in between?" And that's basically the setup of the book. It is an incredible exploration of how these boys grow up together and then grow apart, and how their lives affect one another and their relationship. It is beautiful. Sarah Winman is such an incredible writer, and this is such a beautiful, beautiful story. And just the book in itself is just such a stunning, stunning design. Okay, so that is part 1 done. I hope you guys, like I said earlier, maybe saw some books that interested you, or if you want to hear more about certain books, then definitely let me know. Or if there is a book that you saw that I haven't read yet that you think I should definitely prioritize, I would love to know which ones you guys would like to see me read. And yes, so without further delay, because this video is a bit long, I hope that you have enjoyed part 1 and that you look forward to part 2. Thank you so much for watching this video, for always being so supportive and wonderful, and I hope you have been enjoying my bookshelf tour series. I have had such a pleasure filming it and talking about all the books on my shelves. It is just such a fun thing to do for me, so nerdy but so fun. And yes, so I hope you have enjoyed. Thank you again so much for watching and for being the best community of friends ever, and I will see you soon in part 2, and happy reading!